Welcome to the 5th chapter of the Book of Zechariah, the vision of the flying sickle. It begins, "And I turned and lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, a flying sickle." A sickle was used to cut down wheat, different types of grains. They had a long handle and then a sharp blade of some sort. Whether this was like that exactly, it doesn't say, but it was to cut things down in harvesting. So he saw this sickle flying. Apparently he wasn't sleeping here. And he said to me, now this is probably the angel, "What do you see?" that was in the last chapter. And I said, I see a sickle flying, and the length is about 20 cubits, and the width about 10 cubits, 30 foot by 15 feet. Why it gives us dimension of something like that, I'm not sure what that would entail. I haven't checked the 30 and 15 to see if it equals any other objects. Might be something good for someone out there that wants to do that, to check it out. And he said to me, "This is the curse going forth upon the face of all the earth." The only curse that I could see mentioned in the Old Testament was in Jeremiah 44:22, where it says, "And the Lord was not able still to bear up from in front of the wickedness of your deeds, and from your abominations which you did. And your land became for devastation, and for an untrodden place, and for a curse as this day." So the curse on the land, I believe it's Israel. Now, a lot of people can look at this and completely see a different way of interpreting it. I understand that, but this is what I come up with. For some reason, this is how I feel it is, and I'll show you as we go through this chapter, which goes into the book of Revelation, and it gives us a lot of information about what this is all about. And it continues then, "For every thief," a curse, "for every thief from out of this one edge shall be punished unto death, and every perjurer from out of this other edge shall be punished unto death." So I think a sickle that cut both ways, I'm not sure. But apparently this is all about sin and unrighteousness, and the sickle being put to the earth is what Jesus talks about, the sickle being put to the people on the earth and separating the chaff from the wheat and so forth. Verse 4, "And I will bring it forth, says the Lord Almighty, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of the one swearing an oath by my name for a lie. And it shall rest in the midst of his house, and it shall finish it off entirely, even its wood and its stones." So a complete devastation of whatever this sickle hits. Now we see in the book of Revelation here, in chapter 14, verse 14, it starts, "And I saw, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud sitting was one like unto Son of Man," which could be Jesus, "having upon his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle." So there we go. "And another angel came forth from out of the temple, crying out with a great voice to the one sitting upon the cloud, Send forth your sickle and reap, for the hour came to reap, for the harvest of the earth is dried." So this is what I believe Zechariah is talking about. "And the one sitting upon the cloud put his sickle into the earth, and the earth was reaped." Now, so this is the reaping of the earth that Jesus is doing. "And another angel came forth from out of the temple in the heaven, himself also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came forth from out of the altar, having authority over the fire, and called with a great cry to the one having the sharp sickle, and this would be probably the second one. Send forth your sharp sickle, and gather the vintage of the clusters of the grapevine of the earth, for her grapes are ripened. And the angel put his sickle unto the earth, and gathered the vintage, the grapevine of the earth, and he cast into the wine vat of the rage of the great God. And the wine vat was trodden outside the city, and came forth blood from out of the wine as far as the bridle of the horse, from 1,600 stadiums. I believe this city is Jerusalem. We'll go through and I'll show you why I believe that is. So that was the sickle. Now we continue in Zechariah 5:5, and it says, And came forth the angel speaking to me, and he said to me, Well, look up with your eyes, and behold, what is this going forth is? And I said, Well, what is it? He said, Well, this is the measure. Now, I put the basket because what else could it be? But now, 15 years later, since when I did it, or 20 years, I took the basket out because a measure, this is the measure, the one going forth. Now, the measure, metron, we have a meter, comes from that. Metron is a measure. A measure, here we find out, contains sin and iniquity, but a measure can be used as it was in Zechariah 1:16 to measure Jerusalem, and then in Revelation 21:15 it was to measure. One had a golden rod, and the other, I think, was a string, a spartion. I'm not sure, but different things for measures, which with this metron, a weight for a balance scale. You have the balance scale, and you put these little weights on it on either side, a pound here and a pound here, and it would be even. If it was a pound, 2 pounds here and 1 pound here, it would be like that. And so these weights are measures. It could be in a basket. They weighed dry goods in baskets. Grain was measured in a basket. That was a measure. Or it could be for a liquid measure. And in a container, that would be a measure also. It was also, the word was for a measurement. And you see that in Leviticus 19:35. There's a land measure, as we saw with Jerusalem, which is mentioned in 2 Kings 21:13 with a cord or a rod. And then there are other types of measurements. There was a measurement for destruction in Lamentation 2:8. And Matthew 23:32, it says, And you fill up the measure of your fathers. That is the killing of the prophets. The measure of the filling it up. And there's a measure of belief we're given in Revelation 12:3. 2 Corinthians 10:13 says, A measure of the rule of which God portioned, a measure reaching as far as even you. For we have a measure of rule and being within God's rule. The measure of the gift of the Christ, Ephesians 4:7. And the measure of the stature of the fullness of the Christ in Ephesians 4:13. So all these are the measure. And so I'm taking out the basket. So what type of measure? It doesn't get specific, but we'll have to try to figure it out. So the measure goes forth. And he said, This is their iniquity. So it could be not a physical measure, but some type of a measurement in all the earth. Iniquity is what it's all about. Sin, just like the first part with the sickle. And behold, a talent of lead was being lifted away. And a talent of lead, the sin heavy. And behold, one woman sat down in the midst of the measure. And we're told that this woman was later here as lawlessness. And it says, and he said, right here it is, she is lawlessness. Now I had this but it's in the feminine, so it's a she. Now, like I said, I did these 20 years ago, and I've learned a lot about Greek and translating, and I see things I can change. Hope you forgive me for not getting it right the first time. Some people get frustrated when they see certain things they don't like, and they write me and tell me this or that, and sometimes I correct them, and other times I don't. It just depends. And then it says, and he tossed her into the midst of the measure. So now, this is the iniquity in all the earth. Now, she is lawlessness, and he tossed her into the midst of the measure. So, of this measurement, and he tossed the stone of lead, all of this heavy unrighteousness, iniquity, lawlessness, into her mouth. And I lifted my eyes, and I saw. And behold, two women going forth, and the wind was in their wings. The only place I could see close to this possibly would be Revelations 9:12, where it says, the one woe went forth, behold, come still two woes after these, could be referring to the two woes. And these had wings of the wings of a hoopoe bird, whatever that is. And they took up the measure between the earth and the heaven. So off it goes up. And I said to the angel, so he was an angel, not God, speaking with me. Where I said he before, well, some back there. And he said to me, they build for it a house in the land of Babylon, even to prepare, and shall put it there upon its preparation place. Now, Babylon, they have already left Babylon, and they went back to Jerusalem. So and this is not city of Babylon, but it's a land of Babylon. Now, what could that land be? Well, to explain what I think this Babylon is, we're going to go into a study of the person of Apostle Peter. And Apostle Peter, have a map here, right here. Unfortunately, it's behind my lower screen, but anyway, Peter first appears down in Jerusalem, in the upper room in Jerusalem, after, of course, the resurrection of Jesus. And he was there during Pentecost, and then of the choosing of Matthias to replace Judas Iscariot, Acts 1:13. Then he was healing the lame man at the temple in Acts 3 in Jerusalem. These are all in Jerusalem. Then he went before the Sanhedrin in Acts 4:8 when they told him not to preach the name of Jesus. And then the story of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5, where these two people were cheating the Lord, and Peter is in the center of it. And then it mentions his shadow heals people in Acts 5:15, or God heals them whenever the shadow overshadows someone. And then he's imprisoned, and then appears into the Sanhedrin in Acts 5:29. Then the next place we see is up in Samaria, and Samaria is down here somewhere. I can't see the map. I'll move it up. So here's Jerusalem. Samaria is up in here. So now he's up in Samaria, right north of Jerusalem, and he left there, Jerusalem, in Acts 8:14, to see the people that were accepting the Lord in Samaria. And then when he was there, he ran across Simon the Magi, or the Magus, who was doing tricks and magic, who believed but then wanted the Holy Spirit on him and wanted to buy it and so forth. And then Simon, that was what happened with Simon the Magus. Next, he went up to Lydda. Lydda is actually, they show it here on the map, is down here, southeast of Jerusalem. It's called Lod today, 9.5 miles. Now it has it Tel Aviv on another place. I'm not exactly sure where Lydda is, but next, and then in Lydda, he healed Aeneas. That's in Acts 9:32. And then he left Lydda and went to Joppa, which is here a port city. And when he was there, Dorcas died, a woman that did a lot of good things, and he raised her from the dead. Acts 9:40. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this is it has to do with the geography of where Peter's been. And then next he goes up to Caesarea, and here's Caesarea here on the coast with Cornelius, the centurion who ends up believing, where Peter sees the blanket coming down with the unclean animals and so forth. And then ones from the circumcision came with Peter up to Caesarea. So it mentions that in 10:45 of Acts, in particular the ones of the circumcision. It wasn't the nations. Next then he goes back to Jerusalem, reports to the apostle all the things that are going on down here. Acts 11, and the conversion of the nations he tells them about. And he reports a vision of the unclean animals. And then Herod imprisons Peter after killing James, and Peter is released from the prison by an angel. This is all in Acts 12. And then a council at Jerusalem takes place, and Acts 15, and that's the last place in the book of Acts that it mentions Peter being in Jerusalem. But then we see Paul going to Jerusalem to inquire of Peter, and that's in Galatians 1:18. Paul writes about that, and he goes, explains what Peter is doing with the people of the circumcision, the Jews. It says, but on the other hand, having seen that I have been trusted with the good news of the uncircumcised and nations, as Peter was of the circumcision, the Jews. For the one operating in Peter for commission of the circumcision operated also to me among the nations. And knowing the favor being given to me, James and Cephas, that is Peter and John, assuming to be columns of strength, gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go into the nations and they to the circumcision, that would be to the Jews, only that we should remember the poor, which even I was hurried to do the same thing. So there he is in Jerusalem, but Paul now goes further and he says, but when Peter came to Antioch, now Antioch is on that map, that's up here, Antioch, up in Syria, almost to Turkey. So this is the furthest we see Peter being mentioned as far as a location. And it says, but when Peter came to Antioch in person, I opposed him, for he was condemning, for before the coming of some from James, he was eating with the nations, the non-Jews. But when they came, he kept back and separated himself, fearing the ones from the circumcision. And also the rest of the Jews acted the hypocrite, so that even Barnabas was led away by them in hypocrisy. But when I saw that he walked up not uprightly in the truth of the good news, I said to Peter in front of all, if you, being Jewish-like, live like the nations and not like a Jew, why do you compel the nations to Judaize? We by nature are Jews, and so it goes forth. So the point is here is that here now Peter is with the Jews, always with the Jews, always mainly in Jerusalem. He did go up one trip to Caesarea and then again to Antioch, apparently, to see what was going on up there. Antioch was the third largest city in the Roman Empire, I believe, next to Rome and then Alexandria. But then it mentions in 1 Peter 1:1 that Peter, he addresses the diaspora, the Jews there. He's not addressing the nations, but more the Jews. And then in 5:13, the main one, the verse that I'm trying to bring out, it says, she, chosen with you in Babylon, greets you. She's in Babylon. Now, he never went to Babylon. This is a figure of speech, because Babylon's long gone, ground to the ground. So who is the Babylon? Well, Jerusalem, because this is where he was most of the time. I don't believe it would have been Antioch or Lydda or these other places, but it fits in with Jerusalem. So also, Paul, when he went to Rome, he doesn't mention seeing Peter anywhere in Acts 27 and 28:15. If he would have went to Rome and Peter would have been there, then he would have certainly have mentioned going to see him. So this one large sectarian denomination, which puts this big emphasis on Peter being in Rome and the head of their church and all that, it's just a bunch of malarkey, I believe. It wasn't the case at all. There's no proof that he ever went to Rome. Probably there's way more weight that he never went to Rome. He was always in the Holy Land. Now, so he says that when he was there, she, the chosen with you in Babylon, greets you, the people there in Jerusalem, greeting the people that he's writing to in 1 Peter. Now, the land of Babylon is last mentioned in the Old Testament here in Zechariah. And the land of Babylon, this is the very last place in the Old Testament as far as timeline goes. And we now jump forward to Revelation, which I believe is talking about Jerusalem because of it being called Babylon. And it says in Revelations 14:8, is fallen, Babylon the Great, because she has given all the nations to drink of the wine of the wrath of her harlotry. Jerusalem had the harlotry of going after other gods, never went after Jesus, still hasn't, still into harlotry. The things that goes on there are terrible today even. Revelation 16:9, it goes further. And the city became into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give to her the cup of the wine of the rage of his wrath. Well, there couldn't have been the Babylon that was in Mesopotamia, but it was destroyed. It fell. So it had to be some city. To me, it can only be Jerusalem. And then Revelation 17:5, it says, and upon her forehead a name being written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of the harlots and the abominations of the earth. So the Mystery Babylon being Jerusalem fits in with this because it's not the real Babylon. There's not going to be a Babylon in the future coming back again. I don't see that at all. Some people bring up that possibility, but no. The mother of the harlots. Well, yeah, because the harlotry to the true God of Yahweh, Jehovah, if you will, Kyrios, you had to be a harlot from that God. And what else? How else could it be except from a Jew? So that non-Jews, or Jewish people that walked away, went into harlotry, and it goes into that in the Old Testament many, many places. And the abominations of the earth. Well, the abominations were not given to the nations. They were anything that was an abomination through Israel and through the laws of Moses. You wouldn't go finding somebody in Zimbabwe, and they didn't have abominations if they were doing things that were bad that had nothing to do with God at the time in the Old Testament. But Israel, Jerusalem did. And it continues further in 18:10, and woe, great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment came. So it is a city, and there's the woe, woe. Ties into the two women. And then finally in Revelation 18:21, it says, and one strong angel lifted a stone as a great millstone, sort of like what we see in Zechariah with that stone, and cast it in the sea, saying, thus with impulse shall Babylon, the great city, be thrown, and in no way shall be found any more. I believe that's what's going to happen to Jerusalem. It's going to be wiped away, pretty much be gone. This is my take on it. And then the temple will be rebuilt on Mount Meron. In the last 10 chapters of the book of Ezekiel, it talks about the temple and the waters going out from the temple into eastward to the Lake of Galilee. Well, it couldn't be Jerusalem, so the temple has to be up north by the Lake of Galilee. And so that is why that temple is up there, not in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem will be destroyed, I believe, in some place in that time of the tribulation future. A lot in that chapter, but it doesn't stop there. We in next chapter, chapter 6, the vision of the 4 chariots and horses. And where do we see chariots and horses? Book of Revelation. So hope you join us in our next video seminar going through this chapter. Until then, God bless.